Well, welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. We've been away a while, but we're back, and so glad to have you join us. Tonight I'm going to make hearty, savory vegetable beef soup. And I know everybody has a beef soup recipe, but this one is mine, and I'm going to suggest you try it because I'm going to layer the flavors and maybe give you something a little bit heartier than you're used to. Here are your ingredients. Pause, write them down, and hey, if you like our videos, give us a thumbs up and share. Thanks. Let's get cooking. Okay, we're going to start with our 5-quart enameled Dutch oven. And this is going to be a big recipe of beef soup, so you can make a smaller amount if you want, but this will be pretty full, 5 quarts. I have a pound of ground beef here, and I'm going to cook it very, very separated, very crumbled. I don't want any lumps of beef. I want it very finely chopped all the way through. So we're going to get a good brown on that. And you know, I often have lean grass-fed beef. That's not what I have today. This is just your regular ground beef. And once it's nice and brown, I'm going to add the makings for a mirepoix, which is celery, onions, and carrots. And I have the amounts in the ingredient list, and none of this is set in stone. This is vegetable soup. Vegetable soup is usually what you have left over. But I do want to suggest you do the carrots, onions, and celery because they're the aromatics that help make this a very hearty and flavorful soup. And that's how we're layering the flavors, one thing at a time, cooked in its own way. There's the carrots, and you can see that I've chopped them fairly fine, but not tiny. Small pieces because it's soup, and we want to have some carrots in there, some bites of carrots. And you want to stir these around to get a little of the beef fat on them. I'm putting in a good sprinkle of salt. That was probably half a teaspoonful, and we'll adjust it later. And then I'm going to add some red pepper flakes. You can use black pepper if you like. And I also add a teaspoonful of cumin, which I don't think you're going to see because I kind of got in a hurry and turned my camera off. But you see, we're frying and adding a little brownness to these vegetables, and that's part of where we get the flavor, and the salt helps these vegetables release their flavor and their wonderful aroma. When they've started browning, I'm going to add 2 ounces of butter. Yes, because you know you can never have too much butter. And yes, there is some oil, some fat from the ground beef, but I'm adding the butter for 2 reasons. One is because it adds its own flavor that you don't get from the meat fat. And 2, because I'm going to make a roux and I need my measurements to be right. So I made a little hole in the middle of the veggies. I'm letting that butter melt, and I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of flour. I'm using self-rising flour. You can use all-purpose. The only real difference is the salt, and we're going to adjust that at the end. So stirring in this little bit of flour, 1/4 cup, about 2 ounces, and we're going to let it brown a little bit, and then stir all the vegetables in, sort of spread it around, and we're going to coat those veggies in the roux that we've made. And there is a purpose for that. You want to let the pasty flavor cook off, but you also kind of want to let that flour toast. And yes, doing it this way is just a little more trouble, but it lets each ingredient develop its own flavor. So I'm going to add about a pint of beef broth. This is just bone broth that I made ahead. Adding it slowly, just as if you were making a gravy, and stir it in a little bit at a time, and you can see it start to thicken. Now this is not going to be as thick as gravy, but it is going to be nice and rich. Adding the flour, the roux, and the broth gives you a nice mouthfeel and adds umami, which we've talked about before, that savory flavor. And you just don't maximize that flavor if you just put everything in the pot all at once. So I'm going to stir it around, let it get a little bubble on it, and you can see the thickness that we're getting there. So when I get to this stage, I'm going to add my potatoes and 1 quart of the tomatoes and turn it from stew into soup. And you can add any vegetables that you want to this. If you're adding some other root vegetables, like, I don't know, maybe a turnip or rutabaga, you would add that now too. And I like cabbage, and that's about a cup of cabbage. To me, it's just not vegetable soup without cabbage, but it's optional. So stir, and let's get this all mixed together. And then we're going to let it simmer about 20 minutes because, you don't want raw potatoes. It's going to cook more, but we want to make sure the potatoes are done. I'm adding my last quart, that's the 2nd quart of tomatoes. And I said this was going to be a big pot. And you can certainly go with 1 quart of tomatoes if you don't want quite as much. But this will be 3 meals for us. Some of it will go in the freezer. So we're going to let this come up to a nice simmer. When you start getting your nice bubbles, we're going to cook it for 20 minutes. And 20 minutes is not quite enough to count on the potatoes being done, but this is just the first part. I'm going to add some more things in a few minutes. So cover it. I'm going to leave it on about medium-low heat because I don't want it to cook over. I'm really bad about cooking things over. So here we go, about 20 minutes later. And I'm going to add a cup of frozen peas. If these had been raw peas, I would have added them at the same time I did the potatoes and the cabbage, but they're frozen peas and they don't need to cook quite as long. So I add them about halfway into the 40-minute cooking time. And see how rich that is. No, the cabbage is not done yet. It will be, and the potatoes will be done too. So back with the cover, 20 more minutes at a good simmer. And I'm going to add one more thing that's optional. I've got here about a half cup of fresh okra. And if you don't usually put okra in your vegetable soup, I'm going to suggest you try it at least once. Okra is not just for the flavor, it's also a thickener, and it really gives a nice, rich, thick flavor and mouthfeel to this soup. So I'm going to cover it back up, let it simmer just about 5 to 10 more minutes. The okra doesn't have to cook very long. And then I'll show you what we got. So it has simmered 40 to 50 minutes. It took us about 10 minutes to brown the beef and the veggies. So we've got about an hour invested in this. I want to check these potatoes to make sure they're done, because nobody wants a hard lump of a potato in their soup. So they need to be cooked all the way done. And these are. So I'm going to give it a little taste. We're going to check for salt and pepper. You can add a little more cumin, and if you have special herbs and spices you like, add them. I just need a little more salt. I think everything else is just fine. So I'm going to stir it all up, then I'm going to plate it up and show you what we got. And here we have it. You see the steam. It's pretty hot. And in the background there you see cornbread, but any kind of nice homemade bread. You should join our Cooking from Scratch on Debbie's Back Porch group and find Ellen Serwick's recipes for bread. She makes the most beautiful bread, and that would just go perfect with this bowl of soup. And I'm about ready to dig in. This is really, really hot. So I like to kind of crumble my cornbread in the soup and get plenty of that good hearty sauce. I guess you'd have to call it a sauce. It's not just juice, it's not soup, it's sauce, because we put a little extra time and effort into making it rich and hearty. And yes, it's good. It's very good. And we're in the fall now, but winter's coming, and soups are just perfect for a winter evening. And it's a full meal in a bowl. One reason I make such a large amount. because we just have soup. We don't need anything with it. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. I hope you try this. I hope you like it, and I hope you share it with your friends. See you tomorrow.